Hello, hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today we're doing another episode of Free-to-Play Champion Showcase, and this is the long-awaited Hurndig Showcase. He's been on the list. He's been kind of coasting in like second place many times, and I was also kind of waiting for the stars to align where I could showcase him in the Dark Fate, which is his primary use case on my account, at least at the current day and age. He used to be a lot more prevalent, but I digress. So Hurndig, let's talk about him and what he does and what he can do. So right out of the gate, let me just say that Hurndig is definitely one of my favorite champions in the game just to kind of use. He's a really excellent wave DPS. He's not like the hardest hitting nuker in the game, but he's a really solid mix of debuffing and nuking capabilities, and he can kind of reset his own abilities, as we'll talk about here in a second here. But yeah, super strong champion, a performer fusion champion notably as well, and just really fun to use over the many years that I've had him on my account. But let me not get too far ahead of myself here. Let's talk about what makes him so good by going through his abilities really quickly. So let's start with the A1. Attacks from enemy, simple thing, but it will grant an extra turn and decrease the cooldown of his A3 by 2 turns if this kills an enemy. So he can be one of the champions who can kind of snowball. If enemies are low, he can just keep A1 cycling, get a bunch of extra turns, reducing the cooldown of the A3, but also just reducing the cooldown in general because you take an extra turn. On the A2, really solid ability. He's one of the few AoE decreased defense, or I guess one of the many AoE decreased defense champions in the game, but uniquely he has decreased accuracy alongside of it on a 3-turn cooldown, so really solid debuffing capability there. And then as you kind of saw, the A1 resets the A3. What is the A3? Attacks from an enemy will fully deplete the target's turn meter, so 100% turn meter depletion, or I guess fully depleting the target's turn meter, which can be more than 100% depending upon the relative turn meter. But as long as you crit on that first hit, then you do an AoE attack, and that AoE attack has a chance to place 100% chance when booked of placing weaken for 2 turns. So he can be a decreased defense and a weakened champion AoE. It's just they're not on the exact same abilities. And then once you do that, once you reset the turn meter, you can also place HP burn for 2 turns on enemies whose turn meter is below 30%. That's not just the target you attack, that is anyone who happens to be at 30% turn meter after or less after you take your turn. So it's hard to make that happen, generally speaking, but it is nice when it does happen. You can effectively get an AoE HP burn if you go like right after the enemies go or something like that. And then moving on to the passive is something you'll definitely notice more when you're going against him as an enemy combatant in wave content, but it's the stayed passive. So it will fill his turn meter by 10% every time he's hit, but also, and it occurs once per hit. So if you hit him with, a quad hitter, that's 40% turn meter, so he might cut in. You got to be careful. But it will also, or instead, it will fill it by 20% if an ally dies. So once again, you kind of have to be careful about that, especially with enemy Hurndigs, but also can be useful for when you're using him on your account. If he's getting hit for whatever reason, he can get some extra turn meter and cut in potentially and do something with that. In terms of the build, I have mine once again optimized for the Dark Fate, and that is where we're going to be showcasing him today. So he is in a Savage set alongside some Perception. So we do want him relatively fast. We do want him to do some damage, ignore some defense, of course, hence the Savage set, but also need enough accuracy to do the job, to place the debuffs, and most importantly, the weaken, as we'll see when we get to the composition here. But total stats here, 46,000 on the HP, 5.6k on the attack. We don't want him to be relatively tanky because we are dealing with the Dark Fate, so you want to be able to kill your mirror copies, and again, he's great for that, as we'll see. 2,700 on the defense, 253 on the speed, so he's a few speed faster than the Dark Fate herself, but not the fastest on the team, but he will be the fastest on the team by the time we get to wave 3, as we take a look, or we'll see that when we take a look at the masteries. Full crit rate, 284 on the crit damage, nothing crazy there, but he does have some of the ascended gear on my account, and then 400 on the accuracy. 350 is the target you would want to aim for if you're trying to deal with hard mode Doom Tower bosses. So going through the individual gear pieces here on the banner, we have an accuracy banner with speed and attack with the ascension roll of attack. Not the best, obviously you'd like to have double speed plus attack percentage or something like that, but beggars can't be choosers, so it's a good enough banner for him. Crit damage with crit damage on the amulet with the triple accuracy roll. That's exactly what you want to see. Attack ring with attack, triple attack there. Again, we don't want him super tanky, but this ring has kind of gone through a bunch of champions over the years, and it just settled on him at the moment because it has the triple attack roll with the attack ring. Speed on the boots, attack percentage on the ascension. Again, we want him to maximize his damage, so we'll talk about a little bit later when we get to the Dark Fate composition. But accuracy here, or double roll accuracy, double crit, great, perfect boots. On the chest, not the best, but I don't have that many good pieces in Perception for bottom pieces, or Savage for that matter. But attack percentage there with speed and crit rate and accuracy, all the stats you want, minus the defense, kind of a bummer. Crit damage on the gauntlets with attack percentage. I do want to eventually re-roll this into crit damage and then re-roll this into attack percentage, kind of balance out the stats. Just keep the same attack effect effectively, but also increase the crit damage because he's a bit biased towards attack right now. But yeah, double crit rate, you love to see it. Some speed, some flat attack, some HP. Not exactly what you want to see, but decent. On the shield, speed, crit rate, and accuracy, perfect. Exactly what you want to see. On the helmet, speed and crit rate with some attack. And then on the weapon, speed, crit rate with some attack. Same things, speed, crit rate, attack, accuracy is everything that you're looking for. For the relic on him, I just have a basic Malefic Talon, a rare one that you probably have tons of copies of, and it just gives him a little bit of extra crit damage, and I guess the chance to deal extra damage when attacking, but I don't really depend on this happening. If it happens, great. If it doesn't really matter. He is fully booked, of course. He does have Crushing Rend, 4-star on him, so ideally, of course, that'd be 6 stars so that he ignores extra defense the entire time, but for now, it's just the first couple hits, but again, in this particular composition, that is helpful that he ignores it on the first hit. But mostly, I got him up to 4-star through the Soul Merchant, just because I wanted him to get the attack from the 2-star and the crit damage from the 4-star. And then for the masteries, he's definitely built more like an arena nuker, even though I don't use him for that. But again, he is effectively a nuker for arena level of tankiness for nukers as far as the composition goes, killing the mirror copies. But yeah, offense tree coming down, Heart of Glory, we're going to be going first, so we want to deal more damage. Ruthless Ambush, we want to kill, do more damage when we first attack them. Cycle of Violence, reduce the cooldowns. Helm Smash to ignore as much defense as possible. It's pretty par for the course in terms of a nuker. Support tree, because he is, he benefits from the accuracy side of things, so actually boosting things, I should say. But Turn Meter from the debuffs, Lower Steel for extra stats. Evil Eye is useful specifically against the Dark Fae. You can reduce your Turn Meter. That is primarily the mode that we're going to be using against that boss. And then Master Hexer can extend the duration of his debuffs. All right, so enough teasing. Let's talk about the Dark Fae. This is the Dark Fae team that I use. You can see they're relatively quick, just about a minute in terms of the completion rate. But yeah, he is the primary debuffer for the squad. He is not necessarily the primary DPS. That job belongs to Whisper, but he helps us with the waves, of course, but most importantly, he helps us deal with the boss in a really relatively quick way. But this is a turn meter based composition, so the Dark Fae ideally gets 0 turns when it comes to this fight. So we have Allure in there for her turn meter suppression A1. We have Yukarl in there for the decreased speed and turn meter steal, which is helpful. We have Cold Heart in the mix, enemy max HP, as well as her turn meter suppression thing. So we have 3 other turn meter suppression, but of course Hurndig himself does have turn meter reduction on the A3, so we can fully deplete the target's turn meter with a couple of champions here. And then Whisper is coming in there as our debuffer. And once again, as I mentioned, Hurndig does have decreased defense and weaken effectively in his kit, albeit on different abilities, so that does fully power up a Whisper, so we can see her in action as well. Now on the channel, I do have a dedicated video relative to the Dark Fae. If you want to check that out in the card up above, that kind of deep dives a little bit more onto this team composition and the speed tuning within, but nonetheless, we'll go ahead and run it, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of the things that I set up to make this team work. So the first thing is, you can see there, Hurndig is not the fastest again initially, but because I have him start with the A3, he gets a couple of kills. He has the Whirlwind of Death Mastery. He gets that speed bonus, and so once we get to wave 2 here, you'll see that now he is the fastest on the squad, and that is important. Now Hurndig, the beauty of his kit is that it literally does not matter what state you come to the boss in. Even if he comes in with an A1, which is how I have him set up, he can go in there, kill a target, reset the cooldown of the A3, and then boom, AoE kills everyone else. Now you can have him start off with the A2. That can also work with the decreased defense on everyone, makes them a little bit easier to kill. But in this particular instance, because I have my Whisper set up to go after him, I want her to start off with her ability to ignore all defense if there's weaken out there, so I opt to use the A3 instead. And so there. But from then on, we have Heartseeker came in to control turn meter, Yukarl came in to control turn meter, and so at that point, the Dark Fae is pretty much locked down. Allure is going to just be spamming her A1. She's in Relentless. You can see a couple of champions have Evil Eye on them, so we're getting the extra turn meter suppression there. Whisper coming in again, extra turn, Relentless, and the extra turn popped, and I think she's just going to finish it off. Yeah, okay. Well, a PR. We got a PR with the 111. But yeah, we didn't get to see much, but if it does drag on, Whisper doesn't do what she just did, then Hurndig would eventually come back around to the A3. But of course, having Whisper in the team, it's designed to go relatively quickly, so we don't necessarily have to worry as much about controlling the turn meter because we can do so much damage so quickly. But yeah, that's just one iteration of how you can run Hurndig. You can try and set up the AI overrides to do this, that, and the other, and kind of make sure we set up for the last wave. But as you saw, I just have him start off with the A1 because I know that relative to the health pools on all the champions, he can kill anyone with his A1. It's a guaranteed extra turn. It will guarantee the reset of the A3, meaning even if he just used it on the last wave or the last enemy of wave 2, he will be fully reset, so you don't have to worry as much about his AI overrides. But yeah, so he sets himself up, he kills the mirror copies, big AoE, and then we're just into the fight right immediately. And again, we're taking advantage of that mastery to boost his speed to be ahead of everyone else, despite him not being the fastest on paper on the team. So when I talked about him being kind of my plug and play wave DPS, he used to be very, very important when I kind of used to full manual clears on hard mode, just because again, decreased defense, decreased accuracy helps you potentially resist things, but also just kind of control things. The turn meter suppression was also handy as well. So I used to use him on manual a lot when I used to manual the hard stages. He used to be kind of just the plug and play wave DPS for a bunch of different bosses. I think he used to be on the Griffin team, he used to be on like the Magma Dragon teams, but I've subsequently over the years gotten better and better champions who can kind of do that job better, or just champions who can be more optimal for the waves and whatnot. So he's come out of a lot of teams, but I do still use him for clearing through normal mode, just on auto. So there's no overrides here, but just as an example, we won't auto climb, but I'll just show you. I just run Vlad in there, I run Hurndig in there, and I run Stultus just to kind of cover the affinities, so that eventually all of them are going to do something to someone, and so we don't have to worry too much about weak hits. But he's just one of the many champions who's just kind of a good wave clear champion, because if all else fails, like you just see, he goes in with the A1, kills someone, resets extra turn, and does one of the other AoE. So he's a very, very efficient wave clearing champion, as long as you have him built relatively well. And even on this wave, Stultus literally didn't even take a turn, so it's just Vlad and Hurndig doing the work. But yeah, so that's just why I kind of like him as a plug and play wave DPS as well. I think some people have kind of used like Leorius for that job and other champions like that, but it just depends who you happen to have. But I had Hurndig from his fusion, so I've used him a lot of the times for that purpose. Now, in terms of other areas of the game, he's not the most useful outside of this. Again, he's just kind of been power crept over the years by other champions who can specialize better in other areas of the game. But I will note that sometimes I do run him as my campaign farmer. He does it in around like 10 or 11 seconds, depending upon if he weak hits on the Force Affinity champ on the wave 1. But the only reason I swap him out for Fellhound is if I'm leveling up someone who has gear on and they're faster than Fellhound, then they might waste time by taking turns and whatnot, and Hurndig might be faster than them because he's 250-ish speed, and so that just it can be a little bit cleaner just by running him instead over the long haul of leveling up whoever that champion is who has gear on. And so sometimes I run him as my campaign farmer. I don't think he's a great dungeon champion, but he can be helpful just again for wave clearing, softening them up as a debuffer, but also coming back placing the weaken and turn meter suppression. He could be useful in the spider, for example. Faction Wars, he's definitely strong. He pairs really well with Tholan Foulbeard, AoE on his A1, who plays the weaken, but he places Hurndig plays the decreased defense and the weaken, so you can kind of run them together. That's a pretty solid tandem. But just the same logic, he's good into wave content, decreased accuracy, decreased defense, debuffer, turn meter control, and some damage as well. He's also useful notably for that extra turn trial from the Dwarves faction crypt, so I definitely made use of him in that way, just by making sure he got the kill, so he get the extra turn, and he can kind of chain a bunch of extra turns together to get that trial done. He technically can work in the arena. He does have some relatively high multipliers and a decent base attack, so you could use him for that purpose, but he's just not super meta. He doesn't have anything to keep him alive unless you run him in Stone Skin, so he's just not that type of champion anymore. But he does have really solid multipliers. Clan bosses, I technically showcased him like in a beginner Hydro clan boss on normal mode type team, just because he's a really solid debuffer DPS. But he doesn't scale well into brutal and hard and beyond, so he's not really there. Doom Tower, of course, we showcased him there. Curse City, if he fits in, he can work. And then Siege, again, not really an arena champion. There you have it. That concludes the long-awaited Hurndig free-to-play champion showcase. Typically, the champions selected for this series are voted on by you guys on my community tab page, but in this case, he got second place so many times that I decided to just make the video anyways, because there's a decent amount of people that wanted to see his showcase, so here it is. I think as of this recording, the latest winner of the most recent poll was Nekmo Thar, so stay tuned for that video coming up relatively soon. As always, if you did enjoy the video, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel, and feel free to hit the subscribe button down below if and only if you're enjoying the content overall on the channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching and have a good one.